Hello, dear viewers. It's George from Ireland. So, welcome back to the channel again. And this is about the Chagos Islands, also known as Diego Garcia, an island or rather, group of islands in the Indian Ocean that the United Kingdom has ruled since 1814. They passed through various European hands who were uninhabited for a very long time and then been depopulated by force in the early 1970s. So the people of the islands were called the Chagosians. I won't go into the toing and froing between, the United Kingdom's various imperial wars between France and other countries, gained and lost islands all across the globe. But anyway, decolonisation gathered a pace in the 1960s. The United Kingdom granted independence to Mauritius, those other islands in the Pacific Ocean. But then, at the height of the Cold War, it was decided that Diego Garcia was in a crucial location, giving control over the northern section of the Indian Ocean, and that's why the United Kingdom removed the people living on the islands and put them in Mauritius, which had recently become independent, and they often lived in poverty there. The Mauritians reluctantly accepted these people. The Chagosians, they're mostly black, so they mostly came from Africa some generations earlier. But Her Majesty's government maintained that there was no permanent population of Diego Garcia, so there were no Chagosians. The operative word there was permanent. So had there been seasonal workers, had they been there for not so many years, and okay, very few had been born there and so on. So it wasn't really their country, so therefore they weren't being deported. They're going to Mauritius, whence, well, some of them had come. It's all very complicated. So the United Kingdom gave a military base there to the United States for something like 99 years. It was Harold Wilson was the prime minister at the time, a Labour guy. I think actually right at the end of the 1960s, if I got that right. And so for over 50 years, these Chagosians have lived mostly in camps in Mauritius. Mostly have been impecunious, but when it's they've well over half a century to better themselves. Some of them have shifted to the United Kingdom, lived in Surrey and Sussex in particular. I've been aware of this issue for over 20 years. And John Pilger, leftist rent-a-quote and scumbag, but he was on the money about this one. And I have seen his documentary about it. It's part of, one of these unreported stories that we ought to know more. It's an untold injustice. And then it became crucial again after 9/11. And so the United States Air Force used to launch bombing raids on the Taliban position of Afghanistan from there, and so on. And so the United Kingdom realized the US has got to have it. The USA is not going to cede this easily. And then finally, a deal was worked out. The Chagosians could go back for a few hours to visit the graves of their ancestors, to lay some flowers and so on. But the last minute that was cancelled, which was a real punch in the gut to the Chagosians. They hadn't been able to visit the graves of their ancestors and ancestresses for decades. There's a sentimental value for them. I mean, some people, they like to visit the graves of their parents, siblings, grandparents, and so forth, to see that they're well kept, to speak to the headstone, to somehow numinously commune with the person, feeling that by this physical proximity to the person's mortal remains, somehow you're closer. Um, and that's psychologically satisfying to some people, and they couldn't even do that, and that hurt them an awful lot because of so-called national security. These people, you've chosen them, you know who they are, you can see their passports, you can search their bags and physically. How could they possibly be any threat when they're totally unarmed to national security? How could they possibly spy on the US Air Force Base when they're watched and accompanied all the time? It's absolutely preposterous. But there we go. So now I've seen these Chagosians protesting in London from time to time, and it seemed that their pleas fell on deaf ears. But they'd implored the previous Conservative government to do something about it. It wasn't known till now, but His Majesty's government entered into secret negotiations with the Mauritians, and the UK had paid out compensations for the Chagosians. Some people say it was a nugatory amount. But anyway, in a shock move, it was announced by His Britannic Majesty's government that the United Kingdom should transfer sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, thereby decolonising it. And so that's it. However, the United Kingdom should be allowed to retain its base for 99 years, and the United States with it. Now, it was a contentious decision. Now, that the Conservatives began to parley with Mauritius on this one. It was the Labour government has finished it off. Now, rather cynically and opportunistically, the Conservatives had lambasted Labour for doing this. And it's not guaranteed that if the Conservatives were still in office, they would have actually signed off on this. They might have backed off at the last moment. Maybe they were seeing, was there something else they could work out, like lease back or sharing sovereignty or buying it off Mauritius or whatever. But they're actually transferring sovereignty. Now, the thing is, that is something which is irreversible, and that's something we want to think about very carefully indeed. But the Conservatives, they've absolutely castigated Labour, saying it was an imbecilic thing to do. Mauritius is an ally, the People's Republic of China. China is bitterly hostile to the United Kingdom. It's tyrannical. It's genocidal. Why are you giving it to them? Whatever it says that we respect your right to have a base for 99 years, these things aren't worth the paper they're written on. International law is a nullity. There is no enforcement. The International Criminal Court cannot arrest Putin and is not managed to. These prolific mass murderers, they get away with it all the time. The International Court of Justice cannot arrest a whole country. China has shown very mala fides on many, many occasions. It lies and lies and lies absolutely flagrantly. It grossly violates the human rights of its own citizens on a vast scale every single day. Why on earth would you be so stupid as to trust the butchers of Beijing? So this has gravely impaired the security of the United Kingdom, the United States, and so on. And will it satiate others? No. Now, partly the African Union is being saying, well, how can you ask us to support your position on Ukraine when you still got the Chagos Islands and so on? All right, nobody lives in the Chagos Islands, but that's because the Chagosians were taken away against their will. And the idea is this would appease the global South. Is it possibly a big mistake? And is it just going to set off a chain reaction? Well, how about the Falkland Islands there? Well, there are 2,000 British people there, 99% of the voters to remain a British territory. I say, well, it doesn't matter what they say. They're not a permanent population, not original population, has to go back to Argentina. That's what the Argentines and various of their confederates will say. So perhaps it'll simply satiate a desire to take away British territory overseas. So it might have been a very foolish thing to do, but the unwisdom of it may become apparent. I don't agree with the decision. I have some sympathy for why it's done, and I realize that an injustice was done to the Chagosians, and it's long overdue that that was righted, to return them to at least part of the island, to compensate them, something like that, to give them British citizenship, whatever it would take to provide it with some sort of assessment or restorative justice. Okay. So there's an atoll. Diego Garcia is there. That's the one where the United States military has a base. But there was a statement released by Sir Keir Starmer and his Mauritian analog about this. Okay, so the treaty has not quite been finalized, but the Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth read a statement aloud. Okay, the idea is to ensure the long-term secure and effective operation of the existing base on Diego Garcia, which plays a vital role in regional global security, and so on. Supposedly it's rectifying wrongs of the past. And David Lammy says it's stopped a potential illegal immigration route, and that is true because about 100 people from Sri Lanka, Tamils and ethnic minority people, came to the island, and they were fenced off. They said, "Well, now British territory, we have to take us to the UK." But the period will go for 99 years. The United States has actually hailed the agreement, but is it very foolish? Because the rest belongs to Mauritius. The Chinese may still have a military base there. The Chinese might start spying there, and so on. So over 1,000 people were removed in when was it, 1969? Okay, so the United Kingdom said that Mauritius is over 2,000 kilometers away and has no claim to the islands. Yeah. So what you going to do? And I suppose they're right. You could make the Chagos Islands independent. It's so tiny, the population would be so tiny, maybe a couple of thousand now. It would effectively have to rely on the UK anyway. So what do the Chagosians want? Did you ask them? Did they hold a referendum? Who are the Chagosians? The people removed in 1969, many of them are dead. In many cases, their children or grandchildren. And if you're half Chagosian, half Mauritian, are you Chagosian or not? Probably. If you're a quarter Chagosian, three quarters not, are you Chagosian or not? And you've never even been there. So it's all debatable. Right. Anyway, thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal. Toodaloo. It's georgecallahan79@gmail.com.